Good morning, everyone. We're continuing with our glamour work, and I think this is the 148th program, and the reading is number 88. I hope I'm correct on that. Anyway, it's quite close. We'll get it straightened out.
You are correct in those numbers.
Okay, that's good. That's very good. Thank you, Michael. I just want to welcome those of you who have been able to make it despite the early hour in the United States. There's someone here. It says waiting for a name. I'm not sure who it is, but hello, waiting for a name. And Anna and Anne and Annette and Beata and Catherine, Jessica, Karen, Kim, Leslie, Laurie, Mariut, Martha, and Risto, Zenaidi, and Veronica. And backing us up, Joe, Michael, Tuya, and I'm here too. So welcome to you all. And another person just joined, but I can't keep going back to the list. So we were talking about Maya. We were talking about motive and predominating life tendency. I just want to read a little segue just to get us back in the continuity of it. Many people, says the Tibetan, particularly the unintelligent masses, are solely inspired by desire, material, physical, and temporary. Animal desire for the satisfaction of the animal appetites, material desire for possession, for the luxuries of existence, the downfall of Atlantis, really, the longing for things, for comforts and for security, economic, social, and religious, control the majority. The man is under the influence of the densest form of Maya, and the forces of his nature are concentrated in the sacral center, which is, in so many ways, the center for the acquisition of that which we do not have or want or desire. Acquisition is key to the sacral center. And even the ability to make money, it has a very third ray kind of conditioning. First ray, base of the spine, second ray, solar plexus, and third ray, sacral, if we're putting them in terms of the major three rays. Other people are motivated by some form of aspiration or ambition, aspiration towards some material heaven, note that, and most religions portray heaven in this manner. Ambitions for power, desire for the satisfaction, let's see, I just have to move this, desire for the satisfaction of the emotional or aesthetic appetites and for the possession of the more subtle realities, and the longing for emotional comfort, for mental stability, and assurance that the higher desires will meet with gratification. Now then, DK says, these are so mixed, Maya and glamour mixed together. Even when he defines Maya, he calls it that unthinking emotional mess. So he blends the astral body and desire along with the etheric promptings. And the whole idea is that we are subject to our habit nature, which is so automatic, we don't even think about it. We just say, well, that's the way I am, and we just do things. And so often, because it's unconscious, we don't know even what we're doing. We just continue with our habit patterns. If you look in the horoscope and you study how the moon is operating, or in terms of the thought form effect and the subconscious promptings, you'll see a place where Maya can be detected. Maya and also glamour and illusion. Well, he goes on to say, all this is Maya in its emotional form. Now that's interesting. And it's not the same thing as glamour. Well, we'll have to sort that out and get the feel for that distinction that he's talking about here. All this is Maya in its emotional form, and it is not, excuse me, the same thing as glamour. In the case of glamour, the forces of a man's nature are seated in the solar plexus. In the case of Maya, they are seated in the sacral center. Glamour is subtle and emotional. Maya is tangible and etheric. So at least we have the words on the distinction. You know, maybe some of us can remember having glamour come over us, or being in some kind of myopic mess, you know, where we're just doing, and not even conscious of what we're doing, and not quite knowing even what we're doing, just sort of on automatic. That's why the moon is involved, you know, because the moon is our automaticisms, if I can put it that way. I remember glamour descending over me at one time. Well, it happened more than once, but I remember it, and I just really got the feel of it, even more than what Maya was. And it had a peculiar substance to it. Is substance the right word? A peculiar feel to it. It was attractive. It was impelling. It was very solar plexus, and you know, and then when relieved of it at a certain point, you could feel the difference in the relief. This subtle form of allurement, attraction, you know, that whole liking, disliking thing. You could feel that. And then when it was dissipated, you could also feel the contrast. So often we learn through contrast. If we get the opposite of something, that something stands out in greater relief. You know, like sometimes in order to define a term, I go to the polar opposite in order to get the contrast and see a sharp distinction between this and that. So everybody will have his or her own way, but this is where the evening review and the power of observation comes in, the changes of state. Do we really know the difference between feeling the solar plexus activation and feeling these etheric promptings, and the mixture between the two of them, because nothing is just cut and dried absolutely. So that's just a little, you know, segue from where we were last week. And now we're here, and such are the forces of Maya. Okay, wait a second. I've got to get my bracket here, just in case. Yeah. Such are the forces of Maya, which actuate, motivate, and energize the life of the ordinary man. I guess the person who's living really mostly below the diaphragm, or the energies of the higher chakras, such as they are basically secondary, and they are feeding the lower chakras. It is quite a difference, between the higher chakras feeding the lower and the lower chakras feeding the higher, as they are supposed to do when we are operating with the transference of low to high. So under their influence, well, here I'm going to just make this a little bit bigger. I trying to get things to stand out. Such are the forces of Maya which actuate, motivate, and energize the life. It determines what a person pretty well does, its action. Under their influence, he is helpless. For they, and here the word is used negatively, they inspire all his thinking, all his aspiration, and his desire, and all his activity on the physical plane. So he tends to want to do the things which Maya inspires and tries to bring them down onto the physical plane. Now, we've had a lot of trouble with that during the Piscean age. One trouble has been the neglect of the physical plane, because we may have had a kind of materialism which was the Virgo pole of Pisces. Well, both signs, of course, can be materialistic. It just depends on where we are in our evolution. So we have not had good organization on the material plane. Eventually, of course, Maya is organized, and this etheric veil, which we call the veil of impulsion, changes to order. And that's one of the gifts of the coming Aquarian age, accompanied by the seventh ray cycle, that new order will come upon the dense physical plane, and already it is, and it will signify the organization of the etheric body. So instead of this neglect of the physical plane or unconscious approach to it, it will be a soul, mind, brain approach, organizing the etheric so that it brings outward onto the dense physical plane the right kind of order and relationship. I mean, I'm not exactly the seventh ray type, but at least I can appreciate that is on its way. So he's helpless under the usual impulsion of Maya. The veil of impulsion, the veil of distortion, the veil of separation, and the veil of aspiration. Those are the four veils of the etheric plane. Impulsion, being driven every which way, being impelled. That is Maya. Then the distortion of glamour, the separation of lower mind, and then aspiration, the final veil, seeking what is desirable but not doing anything about it. Okay, so his problem is twofold, and let's take a look at what DK says about this problem. All right. Number one, to bring all his centers under the inspiration of the soul. See, with inspiration, you breathe in the fire from whatever level it happens to come. Usually it's quite a high word. When we say, oh, I was inspired, meaning you're breathing in and impelling fire from a high level. Okay, so to bring all of our centers under the inspiration of the soul. Obviously, for the average individual, maybe you can't even call the average individual. Maybe you can just call the average individual a person. Okay, it's not working. So, when we talk about inspiration of Maya, it's nothing high. It's just where the fire comes from. And that's what, okay, I'll put that down. Where the impelling fire comes from. Okay. So finally, from the soul, the centers will be directed. And number 2, to transfer or transmute. It's the very first T word there, we transmute, we transform, we transfigure, and we translate. That goes into the cosmic ethers, the Buddhic plane, and so forth. We transmute, that's the first step, and it has more to do with force and the lower kinds of energies. We transmute, we transform, that's emotional. We transfigure, that's mental, and we translate, that's Buddhic. To transfer or transmute the forces of the lower centers, this is not easy to do and takes time, which control the personality, into the energies of the centers above the diaphragm. And basically, you see, don't you, the distinction he's making here between forces and energies. It's never a hard and fast distinction, but generally, in his estimation of things, energies are always higher than forces, unless he's just using the term loosely. So to transfer or transmute the forces of the lower centers, which control the personality, into the energies of the centers above the diaphragm, which respond automatically to the inspiration of the soul. So right there is an important statement that our higher chakras are suited to be enfired, you might say, to be driven, to be impelled by the energies of the soul. And with the lower chakras, it's a bit of a, you have to really work at it, because normally they want to go their own way. So, for instance, if you've got in your horoscope, if you've got a square relationship or some stressful relationship between your rising sign and your sun sign, it can indicate just that there's a battle on between inspiration from the soul, indicated by the rising sign, and inspiration or infiring from the personality in general, indicated by the sun, plus whatever the moon contributes to all that. So I'll just mark these two out, and we'll see that's what we have to do. His problem is twofold: how to bring everything under the inspiration of the soul. Now, if you were to just pause for a minute, and you were to look at your own chakric system, as you imagine it to be, let's say, are there times when various of the chakras, and I suppose doesn't have to be just limited to the lower chakras, it can be your throat center even, even your ajna center, can get away from you, as it were. They are not under soul control. They go their own way. Maybe you'll find that in your nature. And sometimes when we just get emotional and we lose our composure and whatever, we all do it. Those chakras are just not at that moment under the inspiration of the soul. Usually there's some kind of other driving force, and it's personal. Okay, so these are important things. His problem is twofold. And I'll just try to mark that out, and we'll see if we can correct these things in our nature. It is in this thought that the potency and symbolic value of breathing exercises consists. Now, what's interesting is that there's such a close relationship between the breath and the etheric system. It's like from the right control of breath comes the control of the chakric system. But when DK occasionally assigns breathing exercises, they are not of the dangerous kind, and they're always accompanied by thought instead of just a certain count. Here's 6, here's 8, etc., etc. You have to be thinking while you're using the breathing exercises, so they have a mental component to them and a deliberate effort at control. So it is in this thought, the inspiration by the soul of the chakric system, and especially the renegade part of the chakra system, that all of this is dealing. It is in this thought that the potency and symbolic value of breathing exercises exists. The motive. Now, always, this word is coming up. What are we driving towards? What are we envisioning? What do we seek to see accomplished? What is our goal? These are the important things, regardless of how well we do in the realization or actuation or accomplishment of the goal. One day we will accomplish. The direction is what's important. The motive is soul control. And though the methods employed are in many cases definitely undesirable, and this is where he says, well, there's going to be sacrifice, okay? And though the methods employed, the Eastern body and the Western body are often quite different, and the teachers come from the East, maybe not knowing that distinction. They are not masters. They are not really very high initiates. They're initiate of some kind. And though the methods employed are in many cases definitely undesirable, yet the developing tendency of the life thought will prove inevitably determining and conditioning. So this is really important, and there are casualties along the way. Even along the good way, there are casualties because you're dealing with energy, and we can get all kinds of overloads and overstimulation and burning and breakthrough and unsettling of the chakric system, so repair work is needed. The methods used may not save the unprepared physical body from certain evil and disastrous results. Yet in the long run and in the last analysis, they may condition the future experience, probably in another life, in such a manner that the aspirant will find himself more able to function as a soul than might otherwise have been the case. So in other words, in our training, we're going to make mistakes. Those mistakes may have some dire consequences and even disastrous consequences in a particular life. I would say, working with DK, he pretty much saves us from that kind of experience. But there are other people I've seen, incredible burnout among people. Um, I don't know, I found myself, it was really a culture contrast. I was at the University of Minnesota at a time when I had gone there to see the opera Tosca, because that was my business, opera. And I found that there was no place to stay because the students were in the middle of a rebellion and had taken over all the buildings. So I did find my way into what was normally an administration building, completely run by students. And they let me stay there. It was no problem because I was there a little bit early, a day early, really. And I saw some people really, really burned out. Their whole nervous system had been destroyed. Young people with a destroyed nervous system, and it had been largely drugs and the kinds of things that allow the fire to escape and burn through the normal protective layers. I said, well, of this one particular person, I was playing the piano and he came up and back at me, and he wasn't even like a human being. He had been completely shattered and destroyed. And this is the kind of thing people think they can hasten their development through the use of drugs, which is one of the major things that the Black Lodge uses, to lead us astray, as it tells us in Letters on Occult Meditation. Not, I mean, on the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. We can only force the issue so far. We are in a forcing process, and there are legitimate means of forcing or hastening or speeding up if you want to take the risk, but there are also very illegitimate means of doing so. And to a certain extent, DK is talking about these undesirable methods, which, even though they may destroy you in the present, establish a trend for the future which may work out in a much better result. So, occultism, the path of occultism must be the path of caution. In other words, take your risks cautiously because there are risks involved here, and they are of a subtle kind. I mean, you may find yourself battling those on the left-hand path who are warring militantly against the advancement of the disciples, and that phrase warring militantly, that's what DK uses to describe their attitude. Okay, well, so basically the possibility of being overwhelmed and even stopped or in some way destroyed or distressed while the energy is being transferred, it is a possibility, especially if one is foolish about it. Okay, he goes on. Before I close this particular instruction upon glamour, I would like to call your attention, the attention of the group, to the occult sentences which I gave to DLR prior to his leaving the group. Now, DLR was actually a very solid disciple, so I'd have to read up on that again and find out what his departure from the group meant. I mean, he was, as I remember, he was pretty much an initiate of the second degree, which DK said to another such, you see, we rate you highly, he said, of this initiate of the second degree. So DLR was a stabilizing force in the glamour group. And his rays were first ray soul, fifth ray personality, fifth ray mind, sixth ray astral body, his one soft line ray, and seventh ray physical body. He was a scientist, and he was the sun in Cancer with Libra on the rising sign. So anyway, DK indicates here that he did leave the group, and I had failed to register. I thought he would have been one of the ones that survived. I think that by the time it was all over, out of 50 or 51 students of DK who had been in the group, only 8 remained. And those were the 8, I think, who pretty well followed instructions and did what he said, and were not forced to depart the group for any of the usual reasons, overstimulation, rebellion, some personality state, over emotionalism, irritability, all kinds of things accounted for the departure. And when you stop to think of it, that the 8 that remained included Alice Bailey, included Foster Bailey, and Regina Keller, who was the editor of all these books, that leaves only 5. and maybe Marion Walter, the lady that Keith Bailey and I knew quite well before she passed on. She was the youngest disciple there. Maybe that leaves only 4 of the other less known disciples remaining with the Tibetan. So it was tough going. People say you just don't know what it's like to have the eye of the master upon you and to have to endure that kind of pressure. Anyway, DK gave some occult sentences to DLR. They have a definite relation to the group work, and I would like you to give them careful consideration and study. So what you see is that the instructions to one disciple can be used by the other disciples. Basically, they all read each other's instructions if they were in the same group, and they were learning from the interaction. The old commentary, in speaking of the work of those whose dharma it is to dissipate world glamour. Now, we don't know whether it's our dharma or not, but, for some of us, we have a tendency towards it, uses the following illuminating sentences. We'll find out with what seed group our particular dharma is most affiliated. We have until the year 2200, 175 years from now, or 180 years from now, for the completion of this phase of the seed group project. You said it was a 275-year project. So obviously it kind of got started in 1925 when the ashrams moved to the, so many ashrams refocused on the Buddhic plane. So what does the old commentary say? And in its typically revelatory and intuition-inducing language, they come and stand within the midst of whirling forms, some of beauty rare and some of horror and despair. They stand. They look not here or there, but with their faces turned towards the light, they stand. Thus through their minds the pure light streams to dissipate the fogs. Well, sounds a lot like what we're doing, doesn't it? And are we standing? That's the question. There are different phases to this process. They come and rest They cease their outer labors, pausing to do a different work. Within their hearts is rest, not emotional agitation. They run not here and there, but constitute a point of peace and rest. That which upon the surface veils and hides the real begins to disappear, and from the heart at rest a beam of dissipating force projects, blends with the shining light, and then the mists of man's creation disappear. Those are the glamorous mists, and obviously, as well as an ajna center beam, there is a heart beam, which involves, I suppose, the Buddhic plane in this particular old commentary section. They, let me get this, the last part of it. They come and observe. They own the eye of vision. Likewise, they own the right direction of the needed force. Sounds like the third eye and sounds like the ability to direct via the ajna center. They see the glamour of the world, and seeing they note behind it all the true, the beautiful, the real. Thus, through the eye of Buddhi comes the power to drive away the veiling, swirling glamours of that glamorous world, and especially when combined with the clear light of mind. You know, we saw what it was. You blend the physical fire with the mental fire, with the soul fire, and all of that is a reflection of the Buddhi. They stand, they rest, they observe, and these are the trained observers, seed group number 2. They stand, they rest, they observe. Such are their lives, and such the service that they render the souls of men. I would commend these lines to your careful thought, and we will give it that, not right now, but we will give it that. They convey to you not only the field of your group service, but also the desired attitude of the personal life of every member of the group. The steadfast standing, the tranquil resting in the midst of it all without agitation, and the clear seeing. These are factors which must be part of the work of the disciples, whose dharma it is to be involved with the dissipation of glamour. So I think, you know, there's a lot we can learn from these old commentary statements, and I think, you know, we should go over them once again, not this moment, but maybe a little bit later, and we have to think about them. And then he's going to start talking about irritation, which is imperil. You know, they pronounce it that way, and Master Moria says it's a real thing. It is substantial, and it precipitates against the walls of the nerve channels. So it's not just some kind of, you know, psychological state. Imperil has its physical plane precipitation, which when it affects the functioning of the disciple, ruins a great deal. So we won't deal with that now. We've gone to page 151, and we've begun at 150. So I guess maybe is it 151 or 150? No, this is where 151, that's all. Okay. It's just a little bit, but deep material, and helping us understand what Maya is and how it blends with glamour and produces something from the mass consciousness. When we're dealing with the mass consciousness, we're really dealing with myopic, glamorous consciousness. And you know that in the sign Cancer, the two rulers are Neptune and the moon. Now, they deal with the irrational part of the human being, not with the mental part. And basically, we're dealing with a mixture of the moon, which is myopic and habitual, having to do with the habit nature, and Neptune, which in its lower expression is the inducer of glamour. And, in the Secret Doctrine, it says something interesting. It says Neptune is the god of reasoning. So how do you, combine those things? And probably we're dealing with the pure reason of the Buddhic plane, which is intuitive. So what I'm going to do then is bring this down to the place where we stopped, and maybe you've been taking some notes or noting something, and you have perhaps some thoughts or questions maybe that you want to look into. So this is the end of reading number 88 and program 148. And our date is the 3rd of July. Another pivot point tomorrow, at least for the United States, whether there can be sufficient discipline to prevent us lurching towards the 100,000 cases per day, if we can do that. Okay, so it's reading. I see what the problem is. I see what the problem is with 88. It doesn't come out that way because I used it as a code. So I'm just going to put it that way. Okay, and then next time it'll be a evening program, and it'll be 149, and it will be the 10th of July, and it will be 89, and we'll begin on page 151. Now, just remember that whatever you're reading here was not exactly written as a book. It was written as incremental instructions to a particular group of students who were being trained. They never really got there, but they were being trained for the dissipation of glamour, their own, and world glamour. And then those things were put together into a book later. All right.
Two housekeeping things, Michael. For this meeting today, 3 July instead of June.
Right. What's in a letter? All right.
Exactly. And then pages 150 to 151.
Right. Thank you. I can always be counted on to get something a little bit off here. All right. Thank you, Michael. Now, okay, friends, let's see what do we have? What do we have? I see a question mark somewhere here from Anne Veronica.
We have Anne Veronica says DLR was dealing with the glamour of continued circumstance.
Yep, that's right. It's an unusual glamour. And one of the things that DK did was he really was very specific in naming the glamours of people. Now, we've been given a list, and they're more generic, glamours that we look at for each ray. DK had a little, he had a little trouble question, how do I frame the glamour to which you are subject and the frustration you feel because of it? Believe it or not, this man was an entomologist. He studied insects, and he played the violin, and it was pretty obvious to me that he had the second ray monad. DK sometimes talks to him as if he's on the soft line when he has so many hard line rays, 1, 5, 5, 7. He had all the hard line rays except the third ray. But behind it all was some greater soft line abilities. I think you know how it is with studying with Master DK, either your soul or your monad has got to be on the second ray. And if it isn't, if one of those is not on the second ray, chances are one would not continue responding to the note that Master DK is sounding. So this man Neptune was important for him. Whenever Neptune's important, the violinists have Neptune important. I was thinking about Sherlock Holmes, who in the stories of the seventh ray disciple, who I forget what was his name, but he wrote the Sherlock Holmes stories. The Sherlock Holmes was always shooting himself up with some kind of drug or other, and he was extremely subtle and intuitive, and it was obviously a Neptune factor. I think whoever plays Sherlock Holmes and does not include the Neptune stream is missing something. It wasn't all just pure logic. Elementary, my dear Watson, elementary. It wasn't only that, there was something more to it. So this man had a very strong Neptune, and that, was, I think, softening his approach. Now let's see. This
Okay,
good
we
Lord,
have
big.
a thing from Anne Veronica. At the center of a great tornado is a point of peace.
Yeah.
Thus the story goes. It can be found.
Yeah.
And thus it is with all the storms of life. They lead to peace if you are not a leaf. Master M.
Okay. DK deals with two kinds of stillness: second ray stillness and third ray stillness. He says of the second ray, it is like the center in the great storm, like in a hurricane, the very eye of it, the very center of it. There's a peaceful center somewhere. When it comes to the third ray and the type of peace that is desirable, he says it's the quiet, it's the stillness of a mill pond. That's how he, describes the two different approaches. The word for the third ray is stillness, and the second ray type is more easily achieving that than many of the other types, and maybe than all the other types. And yet, hierarchy is a very vortex of activity. And so at the center lies this center of peace. Okay, now please say again the four words that begin with trans. So transmutation is etheric and it has more of the physical basis. Transformation relates to the work that has to be done upon the emotional body. Transfiguration is equivalent to the glorification that is experienced upon the mental plane at the third initiation. And translation is the elevation from the cosmic physical body of the planetary logos, let's stick to that, into the cosmic etheric body of the planetary logos. That is translation. And, sometimes the word transcendental gets in there because we're told that Mercury on the Buddhic plane is transcendental mind. There's a kind of a Catholic term called transubstantiation, and I'm wondering, I have to research it more, but it may be able to be used in this series. I think it's something like when you're taking the wine and the bread, it is not just symbolic, it actually becomes what it's supposed to represent. But I'm not sure that that particular trans fits in the scheme. So what's relevant to us, transmutation, transformation, transfiguration, and translation. And there is a lower variety of that. And in Rule 10, in the rays and initiations, there is a higher variety of that. It's very interesting. We lift all those actions onto a higher turn of the spiral, and we get involved with some quite high initiations when we do that. It's the same way that when you go to Rule 14 and know, express, reveal, destroy, resurrect, the 5 words, you can start them at the first initiation, or you can start them at the 3rd initiation. At the first initiation, they go to the 5th. At the 3rd initiation, they go to the 7th. So knowing begins with transfiguration instead of with the birth of the Christ in the heart. I thought that was kind of interesting. There's so many elevations that you can find in Rule 10. It's a difficult rule, highly etheric in nature, and really an important rule when dealing with the Deva Kingdom. Okay, those are the words. Yeah.
And so Anne Veronica also asked, can the etherically destroyed people be helped?
Yeah, they can wait till the next life, pretty much. And sometimes they've just gone so far that the repair work takes additional lives. And sometimes DK says, and nothing can be done for the remainder of that incarnation. Maybe there's a way to, tamp down the inflammation, which is raging and which is causing the breaking of the protective barriers. But basically, destruction has occurred and rebuilding is necessary. And what I'm getting from him is that the rebuilding is not always possible, and mostly not possible in the same incarnation. I guess it depends on how severe the destruction is. If it hasn't gone too far, maybe there's a way of quieting the inflammation and reweaving, if I can call it that, reweaving the protective webs. There were places in tailoring called reweave shops. So you have some kind of item of clothing and there's a rip in it, and they, or maybe even a break, a rent, and the skilled tailor is able to reweave the flaw, the tear, etc. But beyond a certain point, it doesn't seem possible, and he talks about losing lives in the process because of all the repair work which is necessary. When I saw this fellow in back of me, I said, oh, well, he's gone. He's just gone. He couldn't really speak. He was kind of like an automaton, and currents were going through him, but it was completely disorganized, and the integrity of the system was broken. I would say in that case there was no hope there. It just depends on the extremity of it all, you know. Right.
And we have a very, very long thing.
Excuse me.
Yeah, dear.
Excuse me, can I just comment for this?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, you're on the.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah,
Quickly.
it's okay. It's okay. Yeah.
So I thinking about that what we are destroying in this life, and what is then the procedure after that how quickly things can be corrected. There is something what is very important us to realize, that because of this time is very special. We see that from that there is the time of the forerunner, the era of the forerunner, and everything seems to consummate to that time, and the big conclave in hierarchy. It can be so, thinking about what DK has said, because of the time of the opportunity, that when we destroy something in the etheric field, even though it is the lowest part of ours, but it is still the part which monad tries to build for several lifetimes in order to gain the vehicle for the descending energies in such a power that it is standing. First it is standing, and all of are specialized. So every single unit, and especially the group, what we can call they are aspirants, they are disciples, and particularly then initiates. They are needed in order to uplift now the whole planet into the schedule what is in the mind of the great ones. And that's why, as in any initiation, if it is failed, it will cause for the long time ahead. And my thought is that it is not like the next life, which is then able to be organized. DK says that if we pass the moment, they are all related to the astrology as well. And it might be a huge time ahead when the next time is available. And that is how I understand also for humanity, that if we are failing in this, then it is going to cause more than the next life. Mm-hmm. And looking all kinds of things, what we have been talking earlier to, how many chemicals, things, not only that one is using spiritually too much, that the balance is lost, but also in our world is lost so much good quality in the food, because we manipulate the way we don't know what it is going to cause. So I think it is a very big question at the moment, and challenge that we are going to manage, because there is coming so many from so many directions, challenges upon the humanity overall.
Thank you. In DK's group, there was an example of this. Now, well, there were two examples. One was the disciple IBS, lots of 6-ray, the disciple LTSK, lots of 6-ray. They damaged themselves with the thought form of Master DK, and they fell victim to that thought form, and it required something that could be done. He did repair work, and they were able to return and to manage. But there was another disciple in Australia whose rays were 2, 1, 2, 1, 3, unusual ray combination. He had a secondary mind and a first-ray astral body, 21213, and he made a choice. Now, you know, DK is very discreet about the specific things that his disciples did. And DK said, as a result of his choice, it will probably take him 3 lives to recover. So the consequences of what we may do is not like, as you were saying to you, not like immediate rectification in the next life. It can spread over time. And this particular disciple, who was really quite a high disciple relatively, did something that was going to slow him down for 3 lives. So we have to be careful of the consequences that arise because of our actions and our decisions. You know, some things are physical. You know, you burn the apparatus and you have to reweave it, and other things are psychological, and they have to be dealt with on the psychological level, and they may take a while to rectify. So this is a serious business in terms of the forcing process that we are all involved in. You could rise with the rest of humanity if you want to do that. It's the slow way, and everybody gets there eventually. Or those who tread the path of initiation, for them it's different. So thank you for that thought to you. Now let's see.
Okay, Michael, we have a long contribution from Leslie.
Yeah.
It is a definition from Agni Yoga. Imperil. The poison resulting from irritability is called imperil, which commands danger. This poison, a quite substantial one, is precipitated against the walls of the nerve channels and thus spreads through the entire organism. If modern science would try impartially to examine the nerve channels, giving heed to the astral currents, it would encounter a strange decomposition of the astral substance during its passage through the nerve channels. This is the reaction to imperil. Only rest can help the nervous system to overcome the dangerous enemy, which can call forth the most diverse irritations and painful contractions of the organism. He who is afflicted with imperil must repeat, "How beautiful is everything!" And he will be right, because the flow of evolution is rational. In other words, beautiful. The more subtle the nervous system, the more painful is the precipitation of imperil. This same poison, by the addition of one ingredient, may contribute to the dissolution of matter. Study of the physical traces of imperil may compel the understanding of the precipitations of psychic energy. One can observe the traces of imperil in any nerve channel, but it can be remarked that around the granulations of this poison is gathered some sort of substance. Oops. Going back.
Yeah, that was correct up to that point. Yeah.
Yeah.
Granulations of this poison is gathered some sort of substance
which absorbs this virulent viper. The precipitates of psychic energy will be discovered because each energy has its physical crystal. The precipitate of imperil has been shown to you. Precisely that poison gives so much anxiety to people. Do not forget that the grossest ignorance is not equal to a drop of imperil, for imperil is not a personal product. Evaporating, it permeates space, for the purity of which we are all responsible. You are right in observing that precisely a lack of inner well-being is especially ruinous. One may win all lawsuits, one may meet new friends, but inner dissolution can drive away the very best friend. When pepper dust is in the air, all begin to sneeze. Thus can imperil be spread. You have seen more than once how new circumstances have appeared, but they have to be met. Thus, it is necessary once and for all to understand about the infection of imperil. It is inadmissible to refer light-mindedly to decomposition. This process is transmitted like leprosy. There can be either an increase of strength or disintegration. There can be no third condition. One should not advise strengthening by force. It is impossible to save anyone from leprosy by coercion. It is impossible to keep anyone from imperil by violence. Friendliness is not violence. Growth of the heart comes not from a whip, and a beautiful garden can be grown only by beautiful actions. Offense to hierarchy is irreparable. And that is that.
Where did that come from? I mean, what part of Agni Yoga?
There's several. Fiery World 1 was the last part.
Right. Yeah, that's it. Wonderful book, Fiery World 1. It really is excellent. And during the last number of years, Master DK had said there are translation problems with the Agni Yoga books. And I think Madame Roerich herself was doing some of the translating, and her English was not as fluid as it might have been. So there were problems there. And then Daniel Enton and Edgar Lansbury, the brother of Angela Lansbury, undertook translation during the last 20 years of a number of books to make them clearer. And, obviously they had some connection with Russian and they were able to do it. Unfortunately, let's just say Madame Roerich had the inspiration in her translations, even though there was a lot of awkwardness, and Daniel and Edgar had the clarity, but maybe not the same degree of inspiration. Maybe one might be able to say that, but they were really serious about getting things comprehended. So look, next week we're going to take up Imperil, and what DK says about it, he says it's not normal irritability, it's something else. And we can compare what Master M says about it, but disciples are particularly prone to this problem because of the pressures under which they work. And I think this tells us, look, we're not just dealing with a psychological case here, we're actually dealing with a physical precipitation inside your body, and one that can get into the environment and cause real difficulty. Even the dissolution of matter, which is very interesting. So it was a long quote, but a good one, and it gives us it gives us a beginning for next time when we get together. So we'll just have to somehow remember that that's what we're going into, and maybe keep this. Maybe put it. Can you, Michael? Cut it out.
I can remind you of that.
Yeah, that'd be good. And I tell you what, if you can copy that, I don't know if you can, but put it in a place where other people can copy it, or maybe in the chat box or something. I don't know.
Well, Leslie, I believe, got it from the Agni Yoga glossary. If everyone goes to agniyoga.org, there is a listing of all the books, and there's also a search function within that website, and can search by any term you want.
You can search by terms. It's not as sophisticated as the the CD-ROM for the Tibetans material, because there you can put combinations of words. Here you
Right.
have to have exactly the wording for it to be found. But if you have one term, then at least that term will show up. So, yeah. Or you know, if you're going to put two terms down, they have to be in the correct order, or three terms correct order, and then you will find it, but not from a combination like in the Alice Bailey CD-ROM.
But if they go to the glossary, it has a long listing of terms that are taken from the books.
Okay,
So
that's good.
yeah.
That's good. They had a thing called gleanings, you know. I was, you know, I was prowling in the back room there in the Agni Yoga Society, and there was this kind of cabinet with all these old brownish breaking pages, you know, and they were the gleanings from, you know, I'm sure they've been made electronic somehow since that time, but they were on specific subjects, you know. It was an interesting experience those years to work with Edgar and Daniel and basically discuss the Agni Yoga series. What I found is that the occultism of the students there needed quite a bit of improvement, but their enthusiasm was very great. You know, there was that story. Well, I don't want to get off on too much, but Madame Rurik didn't like what Alice Bailey was doing after a while, and she spread some statements that impugned the Tibetan when she really didn't know any better. She should have. But and that has caused a rift between the Bailey groups and the Agni Yoga groups, showing up quite a bit in Russia at this time, and maybe among others. I was wondering why, as a student of Bailey, when I went to the Agni Yoga Society and was interested in their material, the grand old lady who was there, Sina Fosdick, she said, "Well, you have made your choice, you know." And I couldn't quite understand it because I'm the inclusive type. And basically, it was either this or that, because the Tibetan could not be trusted. He was of the negative path, you know, he in their eyes, and that's because of what Madame Roerich wrote. And I have those somewhere, you know. I don't know if I have it still on my computer, but everything she wrote along that line, I looked at, and basically, you know, to go from friendship with Alice Bailey, both working in the same place, basically, to the attitude that eventually supervened, was not a pretty picture to see, and it's had its effects years and years later. Okay, I trust that's it, because it's time for us to, yeah?
One last thing. Sherlock Holmes stories were written by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle.
That's correct, yeah. He was a seventh-ray spiritualist, Conan Doyle. And by the way, regarding Daniel, he considered himself on the second ray. Leslie, I'm kind of responding to your statement here that Daniel's saying later, the people who study Bailey are so beautiful, which is a nice thing for him to say. He considered himself more related even to Kutumi, and he was on loan, the way some of these first-ray disciples were on loan to the Bailey groups to make sure that missing qualities were introduced into the groups that borrowed them for a while. So it doesn't surprise me because Daniel had a lot of the second ray. He passed on just recently, and he was a great custodian of the Agni Yoga work in New York, in the museum. Okay, let's Tuya now. let's go to this. And here our glamour is narcissism, which means, as you know, excessive self-love, such that one is destroyed by one's own self-love, and that's the little self that's involved. Here, it seems to be the component of many leaders who really, what can I say, they self-glorify. They think highly of their little self, and they do not, as a result, they do not see the whole picture, not by far. It's all based on the illusion of egoism, which results in egotism, and the narcissism is kind of the emotional part of it all. The love function is inverted and aimed towards a very tiny space instead of being broad and inclusive and Christ-like. Okay, so here is the meditation, and you hear me too.
Do you hear me well?
I can hear you
Do
so
you hear
far.
me well?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Okay, it's good enough. I'll let you know if it's not.
Michael, would you be so kind to read the people, because I cannot see from my
Yes.
my
Okay.
mobile the
Yes.
names.
Yes. I will. I will do that. There's one person here. Well, there's a person whose name is not showing. It just says waiting for name, but that's okay. So
Okay.
you tell me when to do it.
So yes. So we all first a little bit align with this idea of narcissism and how it is negative solution for modern times in humanity. And we can reflect the problem in all kinds of aspects. Even though that is a certain time where we have to concentrate to the personality and gain the power of the personality in order to gain the center within us under Leo impulse. But when it is going over, and we remember this mythology, how the Narcissus was looking at himself from the bond, and then in the end was drowning. Preparatory stages, and let us now align with the group members who are now at present working together. So Michael, if you are so kind and name everyone.
Okay. There's this individual who's just coming up as a number, but whoever you are, and then Alexandra, Anna, Anne, Annette, Beata, Catherine, Frederick, Heike, Jessica, Joe Garceau, Karen, Kim, Leslie, Leon, Lori, Mariana, Mariut, Martha, Miro, Nicole, Risto, Tia, Vera, Zenaidi, and Anne, Veronica, Joe Waltz, Michael Stacy, Tuya and Michael Robbins.
The protective formula. As we are going to say together the following mantra, we are going to form the sign of the cross of divinity, touching our forehead, heart, left eye, and right eye. Let us say in unison, touch your forehead. As a soul, I work in light. Your heart and darkness cannot touch me. Left eye. I take my stand within the light. Right eye. I work, and from that point I never move. The three preparatory stages. Let us now focus upon the dual light of matter, of etheric, physical, and of mind, or mental. Meditate on soul contact. Recognize the soul light. And see the scent of soul light. Now fusing with these two lesser lights, the dual light of matter with soul light, the light of reason within the mental body. From the point of this triple light, let us say together, the light is one, and in that light shall we see light. This is the light that turns the darkness into day. The formula. Visualize this great searchlight which have been now created. Turn it, that light, upon the astral plane. Let us say together, radiance are we and power. We stand forever with our hands stretched out, linking the heavens and the earth, the inner world of meaning and the subtle world of glamour. We reach into the light and bring it down to meet the need. We reach into the silent place and bring from thence the gift of understanding. Thus with the light we work and turn the darkness into day. Now we use the weapon of light, and let us pause a moment and invoke spiritual will by using the Antakarana. Sense this living interplay between the sacrifice petals, synthesis petals, atmic plane of spiritual will, and even the monad. The highest aspect of our being. Use that beam that we have generated. Within the will we stand together and see at the same time how the cross of divinity is shining forth through the group. Let us say together, with power upon its beam, the light is focused on the goal. And this goal is for us the glamour to be dissipated, the glamour of narcissism. Throw the light upon the glamour of narcissism. And now the words of power are uttered. The power of our united light prevents the appearance of the glamour of narcissism. The power of our united light negates the quality of the glamour from affecting man, humanity. The power of our united light destroys the life behind the glamour of narcissism. We will now have 5 minutes silence, and during the silence we produce the weakening and dissipation of the glamour of narcissism. We stand within the wheel, together, the protective cross of divinity shining forth through the group. Visualize the light, searchlight of dual light with the soul light penetrating into the glamour of narcissism. 5 minutes silence. And we see the glamour of narcissism have been dissipated. We realize as well that the intensity of purpose has been deepened. Now the group turns away from the astral plane, the attention from the astral plane, and we refocus again back upon the mental plane. The searchlight of the soul is shut off, as well the group searchlight. And we visualize that the work has been done successfully. And with gratitude, we sound 3 times Om. Thank you.
Thank you, Tuya. And so that's our work for this morning. And this evening, at 5 p.m., we will be looking at the not secret, well, that too, but cosmic fire in depth. And we're working then with the foundational fire, which is fire by friction in terms of latent fire and radiatory fire. So we'll take that up, and it's on Zoom, and you should have received every week from Michael. He's been sending these out very helpfully. The ways to get into these programs, the links. So just take a look at what you have received from him. And if not, write Michael, unless the link is there, Michael. I'm not sure if it is in the chat box, and I'm not sure that there's... Yeah?
I'm putting it in now.
Okay, very good. Okay. And then we're reaching the full moon now, and so our full moon activities in Cancer will be presented. And I think it's on the evening of the 4th that I'll do the webinar for the pre-full moon, and there will then be on the 5th Surya's broadcast for the actual time of the full moon. And if you're a member of the Blue Rose Sisterhood, and even if you're not, we are going to be doing the sacred pentagram approach, and that is all broadcasted at our usual YouTube live link. And so you see now in the chat box, the Zoom meeting for tonight for Cosmic Fire in Depth is there. Okay, friends, the whole team wishes you lots of love and many blessings, and we'll continue with our esoteric work trying to make a positive difference in the crises, plural, through which humanity is presently passing and may well intensify as we move towards the Great Conclave. This program and others will be available on Makara as soon as is feasible, and they're also being put up on YouTube as we go. There's quite a bit to put up there, but it will be available there as well. So, thank you, and we'll see you when we see you. If tonight for the Cosmic Fire in Depth, then that's great. Talk to you later. Bye for now.